Hello and welcome to the Nerf Dad channel, where we discuss everything Nerf guns and modifications. Today I'm going to talk about the Nerf Spectre Elite. This is this gun right here. This is the Spectre 5 Elite series. This is one of the newer guns came out there. Nerf has been doing re-releasing a lot of their old guns in the Nerf Elite series. The big changes that they have done, change the internal mechanisms inside of it so they can fire the Elite Dart systems. This is the original one that they've had with, and you can see some of the modifications that they have made is the barrels up front here and here. This is a longer barrel and this is the shorter barrel. The reason why that is the air restrictors on this gun are actually inside the barrel itself. The air restrictors in the Elite series are actually in the plunger mechanism right here. Some of the things we're going to discuss about today's from modifications on this gun is removing the air restrictors and to modify for spring improvements, as well as being able to use the older series darts. So let's begin. Alright, the first thing you want to do is you can remove the screws off of the shell. Up here are two screws. These are long screws. The long screws only top right here. The only other screws you have to worry about are ones right here, right above the front barrel, and this one down here. These are smaller screws. So you make sure you keep the small screws are right here. Two long screws are right here for the slide, and in the back there are two screws here and here also need to come out. So let's go ahead and remove all those screws, and recommend you set them off to the side when you're done so you don't lose them. Alright, once all the screws are removed, you can go ahead and just slide this off, set it off to the side. Two screws are on this one. Slide, this comes right off, fairly easy. You got a pin right here, make sure you don't lose that, otherwise the slide will not work. And if all the screws are also been removed, go ahead and pop the shell off. Now that we got the shell off, you can see inside the internal components that this gun has. One thing to note, the spring right here on this thing easily gets lost, so be very careful when you start moving, taking this plunger off. The spring likes to pop off, so make sure we keep an eye on this one, you don't lose this one. You got the trigger, release with the plunger mechanism, you got the barrel. And this is the switch channel. Zoom over. You actually pull this back, causes the top of it. Now, this orange bar and this orange piece are pretty much useless. They're safety features to prevent you from pulling the trigger while the barrel is open, or preventing from cocking it when the barrel is open. So if this pops out, you're not be able to pull the trigger. These are pretty much useless, so we can go ahead and remove these two pieces. This one is easy to remove. All you gotta do is just pop it out. Take the spring with it. You don't need that. But to get this one, you can take the whole mechanism out. This whole thing slides out in one big piece, and then you can just slide this out and discard it. Once you have this piece out, you got the whole barrel right here. There's the one spring I was telling you about. Go ahead and take that spring off, because it does like to disappear on you. So take the spring, set it off to the side. At that point you can go ahead and we can remove this barrel, the barrel tight and the plunger mechanism to cause it to fire. This is one of the first things we're going to start to modify. Here is the plunger mechanism. You see it's an internal plunger. Here's a spring that we're going to be replacing later on. Put it over the side, we'll replace that spring later. What we're going to do on this piece is we're going to remove the air restrictor. The air restrictor is this little triangle piece right in here. It's got a spring attached to it. What happens is the dart's there, it registers, hey, I can go ahead and shoot. As soon as the dart goes through, it pushes through and prevents any further air from coming through, so you only get a small burst of air coming through and prevents any more coming through. Which is why when you hear, there you go, hear a sound. This is what it is, the air restrictor. Two ways you can remove this. One, you can go ahead and cut along here and pop this off, and you can easily remove the air restrictor at that point, and then you put it back on and you epoxy this back on top of it, and you have to wait 24 hours for it to cure, so you have a full maximum tension on there. I am not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drill in from this side, and you can see inside that it's got 4 points where it's holding the air restrictor in, on the top, bottom, and each side. I'm going to take a drill and I'm going to remove those 4 sections and take the whole thing out in one section. That way I am not going to compromising the integrity on the actual tube itself. Be cautious when you are using drills on this. You see there's little nubs all the way through here. Make sure you have some thick gloves or a vise that you're going to be able to hold these with. Otherwise, if this thing spins around, this will turn around and cut your hand in the process. Safety first, gentlemen. Okay, the air restrictor has now been removed as it goes all the way through with no problems. Also do note that the tube does have a groove on the one side, and what that does is with the plunger, it makes it so it doesn't go all the way through. So even with the air restrictor have been removed, it'll still stop where it was supposed to. So there's no worries of causing damage, because if we're moving the air restrictor, the groove will stop that. That's done. Plunger itself, there are several methods of upgrading on top with the plunger here. The most obvious of them is replacing the spring. Now you replace the spring by wrapping them up and wrapping around the tubes, and just comes right off. And you can replace it with a third-party spring, and I'll show you what these look like. Remove the spring like so over the 2 bridges, and it spins right off. This is a very low tension spring. Nerf has done a pretty good job of increasing the springs they have. I mean, there are Nerf after all, so they want to make sure no one gets hurt, but they do have the springs set up right here. This is a third-party spring. It is thicker than the other one it has, and it is significantly more tension on top of that. You can use a third-party spring. This is a 6K spring. You can't put this in here, but I recommend not to. This much pressure on the plastic gun will cause it to break, especially if you're trying to do rapid fire, slam fire. It will cause damage to the gun and break the plastic. I said we are using plastic guns, and you put too much tension on there, the plastic will break. I have seen it happen. It's happened to a couple of my guns already. But if you want to go with it, by all means, you have the option of replacing the springs. I am not going to do it on this gun because I don't want to cause much damage with it. Plus, the person who's getting this gun doesn't want a short-lived gun. They want to have a long-lived gun. Other modifications you can do to this gun as well with a plunger is you can take some electrical tape and you can wrap all the way around and give yourself a little bit more of a buffer with the spring itself on top of it. That does give it added tension to the gun itself when it slams on top of it. Don't do too much, because if you have too much on there, the spring won't be able to go all the way back and compress correctly, and you won't be able to cock it, and it won't lock into place. Which is an option that you can do, is a little bit of duct tape. You probably want to do just enough to get right around the lip, give you like a 1/4 of an inch tops is what you'd want to put on top of that. I'm not going to do that this time, but as an option you can do is a duct tape, or not duct tape, but electrical tape around the base to give you extra shorter the spring. One thing I am going to do though is I'm going to replace the O-ring. The O-ring on the front easily comes off, and you can get yourself a third-party O-ring from any Home Depot, Lowe's on top of that. This one is a little bit thicker than this one is, and that's what you want, is you want to have more air compression. So you put the O-ring around this one, tie it on top of that, and you're going to need to use some grease when you're done. So you put that on, once the O-ring is on there, apply the grease around it, quite liberally. You want to make sure you get some in the barrel of the plunger. And then you go through and make sure you got good tension. You can already feel the tension much better than the old ring it was. And what that does is it gives you more constant pressure, gives you more air throughout the hole when it goes through. Reattach the spring. Screw it on, lock it into place, and there you go. Next we go onto the barrel. The next mod that we're going to cover is if you're one of those people who have a lot of Nerf guns with the old school orange darts instead of the blue ones, and you still want to be able to use them, most of the Elites prevent you from doing that because they have sticks inside that prevent you from shooting the older style darts. So if you'd like to still use some of the older style darts, remove this and you can see inside that they have sticks that prevent you from putting other ones. Here's one of the new Elite darts. Elite darts are awesome. This goes in with no problem. But with the old ones, the rubber goes all the way through to the base here, so when you try and put one in, it won't go in all the way, which prevents the gun from working on top of it. It's Nerf's way of making sure you get to buy all the new stuff. But if you're like me, and you have hundreds of these still laying around, and you still want to use them, the new guns, you have to modify this. This is a complete option. You do not have to do this if you don't want to. The air restrictors are not removed. Unlike the old Spectres, you have to go inside here to remove the air restrictors. But what we're going to do is we're going to just cut the tubes out so we can still put any kind of dart inside it we want. And the way we do this is you take a hammer or some kind of a claw device and you have to pop off the spring. But be very careful when you do this. I don't want you to go crazy with it and lose a spring in the process. So you have to pry this off. Work it through. Comes right off. A little more muscle power behind it, but it does come out. Make sure you don't lose the spring in the back in the process. The spring right here. If you lose that, the gun will not work correctly, so make sure you have that still on there. At that point, you can remove through if you want, or you can leave it inside. Pull it through, and then you take your screwdriver and then remove the 5 screws. And this comes right off. And these are the spokes that we're talking about. They got to be removed. But you can just shorten these up, or you can remove them all together. Completely up to you. You can even drill from the back here, remove them. I like to keep these on top of here. And I'm just going to take a pair of pliers. And just cut them off. Okay, that's it. So now any dart will be able to fit on top of this. Also, at this point, I like to also do note that there's 2 screws inside here. If you're going to do a paint job on the gun itself, you can remove this whole section right here so you can paint the whole barrel, and you can keep this section separate as the process. 2 screws right here. This will remove this all out, and you can still attach the whole barrel if you want to paint to make it look better. So now both darts fit in there with no worries all the way around. And all you do is put it back together. Once you have put the 5 screws back in around the barrel itself, go ahead and put the pin back through. Put this back on. You can pretty much man it on there. If you need to, a little tap with the hammer. You're good to go. Now that we've done the modifications to the barrel and to the plunger, make sure we put those back in. When you put that back in, make sure the pentagon lines up inside of it. You can actually pull back the white, make sure it goes through, so you know it's cycling correctly. When you put the plunger back in, make sure it's lined up. Spring is behind the blue plastic on both sides. And keep 4 springs we need to keep is this one, that one, and that one. Remember, we removed these 2 because all they do is prevent you from pulling the trigger with the barrel out. They're just a waste and just you can easily lose. Just more safety mechanisms. So, take the shell, line the shell back up on top of it, close it on up, and everything lines up perfectly on top of it. So we go ahead and put the screws back in on that. And remembering that here and here are the small screws. Small screw here on this one. And the other small screw right above the front barrel. The rest of all the standard size screws, you go ahead and put those all in. Once you have all the screws put in through the actual case itself, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put the slide in. You take the pin on one of the slides and you go through the top. Now there's a spring on the very top, right up through here. You have to make sure you put the pin and it goes through that spring. That's what causes the slide to go forward after you pull it back. So you have to pull it through and you make sure you line it up. And then you have to make sure the back connects in with the slide itself and the slide flush. So it should be flush. You should see through here that the back pins are on the slide, on the plunger, and the front pin is through the spring. If you've got that, you take the front piece and you line it up and you slide it through, and you know it's on there good. Long screws, and you screw it in. And lastly, what I put in there is the backing. Make sure it's got a frowny face when you put these back on, and you screw right in. Okay. They're all set. Pop on out. Load it up. You now have modified the Nerf Spectre Elite. Enjoy. Which gun should I do next? Leave your suggestions in the comments below. I can be reached at nerfdad@hotmail.com, and please follow me at nerfdad on Vine. Thank you for watching.